the reason on why cars aren't made for the everyday person anymore. So right now, the middle class is in a rough spot. Middle class is pretty much poor, and middle class is right now lower to middle class. You can be higher to middle class, but at that point you're kind of at a place where you're just kind of comfortable and you're able to maintain what you have, because if you're above that, you're probably in the rich or the wealthier side. So right now, a majority of people are in the lower to middle class, and car manufacturers are going back and forth on the idea of, well, okay, do we make a car that's cheap and affordable for a lot of people to buy, or do we make a smaller amount of more expensive vehicles for the small amount of people that own the mass majority of money? And obviously they have to cater to, a little bit of the small crowd, but the basic fundamental of how the modern automobile is made is that it's made to cater to the upper echelon of society. And it's kind of sad. I mean, I'm not the type of person that has brand loyalty to anyone. I'm not gonna, have a hard on for a Ford, or, care about what Chevy's doing, or love Dodges. And I prefer Toyotas just because of the reliability factor, and that's what I grew up with. I grew up with I grew up with Ford Rangers and Toyotas, and now I own one of each. I'm going to be honest, I don't think the manufacturers don't care. At the end of the day, business is business. But a lot of the EPA standards that are being put on them is making it harder. The dilution of poor practices is making it harder. The average consumer makes it harder. And here's an example. I think a lot of people don't know what they want until they have it. Because even if the manufacturers made a cheap and affordable car for everybody, that doesn't mean it's going to sell well. You'd be tapping into a market that might not exist. I mean, it does exist, but that's where things like advertising and the hype around certain things gets built up. We're moving so far forward in our society with technological advancements that I think we're forgetting kind of how we got here. And I think that if we don't do a course correction soon, we're going to see a lot of negative effects of the modern day vehicles. And people are, already starting to stop buying newer cars. And it's pretty unfortunate because in America, our whole business motto is freedom, trying to have more choice, more options, more flavors of ice cream. And in ways, it's like almost like that freedom kind of gets taken away. Because a lot of people want to work really hard, and maybe one day they want to buy a brand new car for themselves. And they save up and they save up and they buy that new car, and then it becomes a burden instead of a something that they worked hard for. Like, I know people that work triple, quadruple time, people who don't have kids or families or houses or anything, but they just want that one piece in their life, and that's their car. And they just want to be able to, you know, have that one thing because that's who they are. And there's a person I'm thinking of in particular. He has a Porsche, and he worked quadruple time. It's like $100-something thousand Porsche, but he put all of his money into it because in his life, that's what he wanted. Now, he got it, but he had to get it like secondhand because he couldn't buy it new. And it was getting pretty difficult to keep it maintained with the income that he had because he still needed to live. And I hope he still has it, but it looked like things for the future would be going more difficult and against him. And it's a shame. I mean, obviously it's a Porsche, and Porsches are always going to be more expensive than other cars. You know, he could have chose any other car to buy, and it probably would have been better. But the premise is that, you know, just buying a car isn't always going to be the smartest financial investment. But even the normal average day consumer cars are creeping towards the level of owning a luxury car. Owning a modern day regular car is a luxury in itself. Cars, since their creation, was always seen as a luxury, and then over time cars got panned out and became a normal indoctrinated into society almost seamlessly, to where, you know, it would be crazy if you didn't have one. You know, cars are extensions of the people who buy them, and now it's starting to turn back in the other direction of when cars first came out. You know, they're more luxury items for the wealthy than they are for, you know, for the people, for the mass majority of people. I went to a fair in Woodstock, Connecticut recently, and there was all old farming equipment, old cars, stuff like that. And it was funny because a lot of the old tractors were powered by Ford, original Ford 4-cylinder engines. You know, an old Ford engine, like a flathead Ford. There were some flathead Ford V8s, and then there were original flathead Fords. And a lot of the tractors were powered by them. And just looking at the engineering, it was interesting on how it worked. You could run those engines apparently on diesel if you got the combustion chambers hot enough. I've seen people where they're running it on all different types of fuel, and you know, you could put those engines in your tractor, you can put them in your cultivators, you can put them in your generators, you can pretty much put those engines in everything, and everything was so seamless. It's funny because in the earlier 1900s, we were almost living in this futuristic idea of a world where this one easy consumable engine could do it all. You know, just put a Ford in it and everything powered off of it. All your farming equipment, they had the, you know, you pulled an engine with a big crankshaft on the end of it with a belt drive, and you can use that to power your generator for your house, and you can run it on any type of fuel you want. It was almost living in a futuristic society in an old times sense, and you can't see that nowadays. You know, it's not like you can take your EcoBoost out of your Escape and use it as a generator to power your house. And it's not like you can run your car on diesel or propane. You know, it's probably flex fuel, but in this neck of the woods, flex fuel is not common, or racing fuel or any type of other octane. You can't run your car on a 50, 60 octane like it was back in the earlier 1900s. And, you can lead that into, well, it's more efficient, this types of fuel, but they aren't there. So it inherently makes them worthless if they're not around. And that's kind of my argument with the electric car stuff is, we're pushing so hard for the future. Yet there's only 10 parking spots at a grocery store that have chargers on them. And there are no charging stations where I'm from and around this area. And you end up just having to plug it into your house. Which, if you don't have solar panels or any type of electrical storage system, you're going to be spending essentially, from what I've seen, close to a 1-for-1 as if you just owned a gasoline car in the first place. And it takes too long to charge. It's like 20 minutes to a half hour. Some of them are fast chargers, which is probably faster. And Teslas are great, but they're not at the same time. They're overly engineered nightmares, but they are a different type and source of energy and material than your conventional car. I just don't see a future of, especially how mechanics are able to, maintain these cars, or, the DIYer is getting pushed out a little bit. What I would actually think would be a good idea is having retrofit kits of electric or hybrid motors to attach to your vehicle, all the way ranging from the 1960s and up, and something like that. I mean, we did it already. There was a video where I saw somebody converted I think it was maybe a Camaro. It was either a Camaro or a Malibu or something, and they converted it to electricity and drove it every day, and it was fine. Did the vehicle meet the standards? It's like, well, it's all electric, so it must. But yeah, I'm also really not sold on the environmental aspect. I mean, we're still digging holes in the ground, and a bigger argument is, it protects against smog, I guess. I mean, you still have to melt things and burn things in order to get, pieces of metal. I mean, I guess it helps smog in city condensed areas. But I don't think that's a vehicle's problem. I just think that's the over dilution of people in a concentrated area's problem. Because people aren't going to move. But obviously you have to create a car to cater to that type of area. Like, I think Teslas would be great in areas like California and New York City and big dense cities. But I don't think it should be pushed upon the everyday consumer that lives in the suburbs or small towns or farms. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. We're still at the point where you can buy an 80s. I remember I had a 1988 Chevy 1500 red Cheyenne. And I was a dumb kid at the time. I bought it for like $600. It had a blown brake line. I ended up selling it as fast as I bought it after I fixed it. But it needed, it ran good. It ran okay, but it was, it was an old truck, small little 305 toilet bowl injection. Engines like that are actually more efficient than you think. because at the end of the day, an engine is an engine. It's a combustion engine, and it's going to combust fuels in the conversion of energy, of horsepower and torque, to move an object, which is an object in motion. We can put as many turbochargers and make the combustion, make the cylinders of the engine this thin to maximize its engineering capacity, but at the end of the day, an engine is an engine. And I think that the direction we were moving the engines was great until, for American markets, until the 90s came, where the Japanese market took over with 4 cylinders, and the Americans wanted to kind of follow them, and ever since then the Americans have been doing their hardest to be like the overseas markets. And I think that we're working in the wrong direction, and I think America should stay in their lane and stick to what they're good at, and the overseas people should stick to what they're good at too. If you want a good 4-cylinder car, you buy Japanese or something like that. You don't buy American. You buy American, you get a bigger 6-cylinder, an 8-cylinder car. My Ford Ranger is a 2.3 liter EcoBoost, similar to the ones that are in the Focuses, and the Mustang EcoBoost. But yeah, it makes 270 horsepower. But I'm going to be honest, that engine's got to work in order to, move that big truck around. The Ford Ranger has significantly gone up in weight and in price. And the 2.3 liter and the 3.0 and the 4.0 that came in the previous generation were perfectly normal and feasible for the type of truck it was in. It didn't get good gas mileage, and the reason why is, it's funny because it got decent gas mileage. It probably got like 18, but for a small truck like that, it should be getting more. It's funny because the engineering aspect of it was not like modern day cars, and a DIYer could definitely fix it on his own if he wanted to. It wasn't great, especially if you compare it to earlier generations of cars or trucks or Ford Rangers, but it was actually feasible, but it wasn't as a quote unquote efficient. And I think that has to do with, we gave the people what they wanted essentially, and they got a 6-cylinder truck, and they leaned into what made the truck good versus trying to optimize things for efficiency. And what's funny about that is it's sold, because the Ford Ranger is cemented as an icon now, and it's not anymore. The people who buy the newer Rangers aren't, they probably like older Rangers, but the people who buy newer Rangers, I bought it because I thought it was cool, and at the time I was single, and then, it was an expensive purchase. But a lot of people buy them because they're just like luxurious trucks, and I think that defeats the whole purpose of a Ford Ranger. So now we have these turbo 4-cylinders moving down these big hunks of metal, and it just doesn't feel like it's got enough go for the type of full-size truck that it is. I lined my Ranger up to a 2012 full-size F-150 that had a Triton motor in it, and they're about the same size, pretty much 1 for 1. And it's good, but it's not good. We should still have a market for smaller compact trucks, and I don't think the Maverick does that exactly. It's still, it's not really a truck. It's a truck in words, and a lot of people in the comments let me know. One of the guys in the comments was getting pissed off because he said that I was gatekeeping what a truck was. The Maverick is a truck, and yeah, maybe on paper, but I don't think the average consumer thinks that. And if the average consumer doesn't think that, it's gonna be just like the Honda Ridgeline, because the Honda Ridgeline's a pickup, or not a pickup, but it's a truck, I guess. And at that point, there's no point, because if your main consumer base for small trucks isn't buying it, then there's no point. The people who are buying Mavericks are not truck people. Like, for instance, if you go on Facebook Marketplace, you can probably find a bunch of people who have lowered their Ford Maverick and put a tune in it for better handling and performance driving, which is a little interesting because you don't see anybody lifting them and putting off-road tires on them. I mean, yes, it exists, but very rare. So it's not exactly leaning into what makes a truck good. It's kind of like a Japanese truck, but it's made by Ford. And the problem is it has this similar effect of like when Kia tried making the Stinger. It's like, all right, well, Kia's going to make a performance car, but it's Kia. That's like if Ferrari tried making an economy car. Like, it doesn't work well. And I think that all these different manufacturers are trying to tap into different markets instead of doubling down what they're actually good at. Like, instead of working on their strengths, they are trying to follow a trend into what they're weak at and making it work. Now, I'm all for creativity, but I don't think it's working out for them, and they're losing money. I don't think Ford, Chevy, Dodge should be, forced to, to make electric cars. I think you should leave that to Tesla. They're good at it. They'll double down on what they're doing. Other car companies and manufacturers shouldn't have to follow suit with that. It seems kind of ridiculous. A lot of it's the government forcing them to do it, but a lot of them is doing it because they feel like they also need to tap into a market and make cars more luxurious. Like, let's think of some cars really quick. The Charger, the new Charger that's coming out, or it came out already. It's gonna flop because, as it turns out, when you want to buy a Dodge, especially a Charger, you either want the Pentastar V6 if you're not a fan of horsepower and you're just buying the car because you're a casual, avid Chrysler person and you just need a practical car with some style and some pizzazz and some class, but with a smaller engine for, gas mileage efficiency, practicality, whatever you want to call it. And you need 4 seats, and you buy a Charger. Or you buy a Charger because you want a big V8 and you want to have a dadmobile, but you want to look cool while you're doing it. And, obviously the Challenger is the alternative. And it's not practical for everybody. I think the Charger is just as cool. What's interesting to me is they finally decided to make the Charger a 2-door again, gave it the body of a Challenger, and morphed a Challenger and a Charger together, and then put a hybrid electric engine in it, and they put a 6-cylinder twin turbo engine in it. They had everything going in the right direction, but they didn't put a Hemi in it. And that was a big mistake. The car looks like it's the cyberpunk, it should be made of stainless steel, which I'm not actually against, but the car doesn't really scream rebellion, because Dodge, all the manufacturers are always about rebellion. And they always lean into what makes them good. So if the government's saying, well, you need to make these standards on your car, they should say, yeah, fuck that. let's build the most outrageous possible thing and let's stick it to the government and let's make something fucking cool. So let's make this like cyberpunk, futuristic, big V8 powered car, and let's say fuck you, because that's what they're good at. But instead, they kind of took the coward's way out, and they leaned into things that they knew nothing about, and it failed, and it will fail. Meanwhile, the Corvette is a supercar now, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because again, there's no, I mean, yeah, you can buy a C8, but it's, you're buying a Ferrari, at least in handling and performance wise. It's not exactly a Corvette. It's a mid-engine, almost at this point, supercar. And it's not consumer friendly in the sense of, back then you wanted a cheap, affordable sports car. You either got a Camaro, which was a muscle car technically, or you could buy a Corvette. And Corvettes weren't exactly out of reach. Like they were, but they weren't. Other costs in the market and in the economy were down, and if you wanted to lean more into buying the nice car versus the nicer house, you could buy a Corvette and live in a more affordable house. So it made more sense. Nowadays, you want a C8, it's like, well, you're going to have to be living in it because that's all you're going to be able to own. Even a Camaro. Anything really. That's, nobody can think about buying a Charger nowadays, or a Camaro, or a Challenger, or a Mustang, unless you want the EcoBoost Mustang. And as it turns out, I think the EcoBoost Mustangs are cool. I wouldn't say that the EcoBoost Mustangs are cool. I think they're good for what they do, but I wouldn't say that they're cool. The coolest thing on the planet is, you want a big V8? Well, I got the fucking car for you. You buy a fucking Mustang with a V8 and a stick. It's just what you do. Is the automatic faster? Yes. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with the automatic. It's a great car, great transmission. It's one of the best, other than the Chrysler 8-speed. But, you want to fucking buy a Mustang because you want a big V8 with a stick. That's what you want. And I think that manufacturers should stop doubling down on what makes their cars not cool and, make something cool. Like, I want to buy a Mustang with, basic electric windows or basic crank windows, and no infotainment special bullshit, no switches, no track modes, no sport dials or diff adjusters or active anything. Just give me the biggest V8 I can buy. Give me the beefiest rear end, give me the beefiest transmission, and make it look like a Mustang. And I'll pay for it. All right? You don't even need to give me bucket seats. Just give me double down on what makes the car the car. At my last job, I got to drive a GT350R. It's like a 2019 or something like that. And the customer said I could drive it. So I did. And I got on it. Got on in second, didn't fucking do it in first. And the computer stopped me from having fun. It spun the tires, but then traction control's lighting up because it doesn't want me to crash. The car is so good that it's anti-fun. And even when I turned off traction control, turned off stability, and I did it again, yeah, I was laying patch, but then the computer I felt was taking the power away. And I'm just like, we're making them so safe because there are idiots who are going to kill themselves, 100%. But I don't think that's the car's fault. I think that's just people being idiots, you know? And I think we're catering to idiots. We're making cars dummy proof, and, it's not enjoyable. For a big V8 manual, it was the least rip my face off scary thing I've ever driven. It was like driving a Ford Escape. It didn't have that type of raw power like an older car would. And especially when I bang shifted second to third, the computer cut out the horsepower and made it more linear so it didn't chirp the tires. And I'm like, this is kind of fucking gay, and not fun. And this is all being done because there are idiots who are going to kill themselves and hurt other people. But it's like, that's a person problem. I don't think cars should have to cater to the problems that people have with how bad of a driver they are. Our cars 10 times more safer now than they ever were. Yes. But that must mean there's a safety bubble around them, and people who are passionate and like cars they're unenjoyable. They're not as enjoyable, the newer ones, and they're just kind of boring. And the future of performance cars to me looks boring, because I rather drive a slow, raw car fast than a fast, tuned, streamlined car even faster, because the illusion of speed isn't there. It's like you could be cruising at 120 and not feel it, and it's like underwhelming. The sense of speed is gone, because if you're driving something that's sketchy and you're going 60, you'll be like, oh my god, this is crazy. I just don't get the excitement from newer cars. And like, yes, the Tesla, the instant torque thing, does it put you back in your seat? It's like, yeah, but there's no emotion. There's no passion. There's no engine in the front or in the back. There's no gears you have to change. You're just kind of on this roller coaster. And roller coasters are fun, but, you're not going to go on a roller coaster every single day, are you? You're going to want to control something, and maybe you want to, control the speed of how fast you go on the roller coaster. Maybe you want to, take different turns, or maybe you want to have a gear stick in your roller coaster. I don't know, just something that says, I'm the driver and this is my car, not I'm sitting in the car and the car is driving me, because the cars feel like they're driving themselves. I tried merging into the lane to drive around a person one day, and the auto lane departure pulled the wheel back into the lane, and by the time I was going to do it again, there was another car that was already coming. And I'm just like, it's just ridiculous. I just don't think, like, we're making cars so safe, and it's like, okay, why do we have lane departure? Well, because people fall asleep at the wheel and they're not paying attention because they're on their phones. And we're having to have our cars cater to, I don't know, ignorant people that can't get off their phones for 10 seconds. It's just, why is that the car manufacturer's job? How about you send mandates over to Apple? Like, hey, too many people are texting and driving. When your fucking phone is in your car and it senses that your phone is moving at a certain speed, you should have the phone shut down. Phone is moving at 25 miles per hour, not able to access. How about that? But they don't do that. And the manufacturers are doubling down on things that cars shouldn't have, like bigger tablets, bigger screens. Because if your phone wasn't big enough of a distraction, now you have other things that are distracting you. And all it does is further enforce the problem, which means that cars are going to get smarter and people are going to get dumber. I just don't think these modern cars were made for the general consumer, because as it turns out, the general consumer just wants a car where they can hop in it and drive to where they want to go. And then if they have another motive, like I need to be able to hop in it. So here's your baseline when you're building a car. First things first, when you buy a car for the mass majority, the baseline understanding of what the functionality of a car is, well, I need to hop in it, turn the key, put it in drive, and get to where I need to go. You start from there. Then it's like, well, now I need to put the key in it, put it in drive, and get to where I need to go, but I also need to put gravel in the back. Okay, so now you bought a car that can do that, but it's also a truck, so now you bought a truck. And nobody is saying, well, now people have $2 in their pockets and, want to live this very Western cultured life of grandeur and luxury with nothing. And then they go, I want to be able to put the key in ignition, put it in drive, get to where I need to go with my truck bed. And I also want an infotainment screen in the middle for some reason, which I don't even know why. And a lot of it's just because it looks cool. But at the end of the day, it doesn't, like, I want to say that that's personal taste, but it doesn't actually look cool either. Nor is it any more efficient, because now you have digital knobs and switches that you have to touch a million times because they don't work properly, and your fingers touching them fucks up the screen, and it doesn't actually know what temperature you want to set at. And you got to click buttons like this when before you just had a knob with a number on it, and you turn it. When it says 70, that means that's the temperature you want. And then there's a red and a blue, and then you turn it red or blue depending if you want it hot or cold. And there are a couple knobs and switches for higher fan volume, lower fan volume, or speed, and that's it. And there's your climate control. It's like now they want to overcomplicate the wheel, and they want the consumer to pay for it. And essentially what it is it's a mask for poor engineering.